Has the whole world gone tango uniform? Because new intelligence suggests North Korea has deployed thousands of troops to support Russia's war effort, marking the first time in history that their soldiers have ever fought in Europe. This shocking escalation has major consequences on the war, but not for the reasons you might think. It opens up a whole can of worms on every level, from the tactical to the diplomatic. In this rundown, I'm going to use diplomatic messages, declassified intelligence, and historical analysis to find out, how does North Korea think that this move will benefit them? In what way will this change the situation on the battlefield? And what evidence do we even really have that North Korea is actually deployed to Russia? I submit to you Exhibit A, 2 videos that were posted by pro-Kremlin military bloggers on Telegram, which ended up leading to the US intelligence agencies confirming the presence of thousands of North Korean soldiers on Russian territory. Exhibit B, additional satellite images provided by South Korean intelligence revealed their increased footprint, and several more geolocated videos confirmed their presence at 5 separate bases. So humor me here, let's assume that these reports are true. Then what do these North Korean troops actually bring to the battlefield besides their state-approved beliefs? There are different early estimates that I've seen. The US government initially estimated that it was only 3,000 soldiers, then the Pentagon upped that to 10,000 by October 30th. Other sources from like the South Korean intelligence placed that number at 13,000 North Korean troops and quickly rising. Where I think the confusion might come from is the fact that there are reports that indicate they're attempting to scale up to 12,000 soldiers by December 2024 ultimately. Either way, it gives us a ballpark assessment here, right? For perspective, that's enough people to fill a small stadium, but for even greater contextualization, there are believed to be 600,000 Russian soldiers supporting the war against Ukraine around there. So on the one hand, it's true, 12,000 North Koreans is a drop in the bucket. It's not much in a war that claims as many as 1,200 soldiers' lives per day. But we'll see in a minute, that's not the main concern here.
Tucker, you want to endorse this?
I basically work around the clock to keep this channel running smoothly, so when I'm researching and writing these episodes, I find that I often need an energy boost to help keep me focused better. But with the coffee and energy drinks, I always hit a point where it doesn't work anymore and it just overstimulates my system and kind of cracks me out. I don't know if that ever happens to you either. And I found that this episode's sponsor, Viva Zen plant-based supplements, does the trick every time because it harnesses this unique blend of botanicals and natural ingredients that start working almost instantly. And it brings me this wave of energy and this calming relief at the same time. You feel it right away. It comes in a bunch of different forms too, so whatever you prefer, shots or gummies or powder, and they've been in business for over 10 years and sold 100 million bottles. So I'm excited to introduce you to something that tons of other people have already discovered works really well. And my friends at Viva Zen even made a special offer just for you guys, the Task and Purpose viewers. Get your Purpose Pack to try a variety of Viva Zen products for only $9. Just click the link in the description below with a pinned comment or head over to vivazen.com/Chris to get your Purpose Pack for only $9. According to South Korea's intelligence services, we're talking about North Korean artillery specialists, special forces operators. Specifically, they're from North Korea's 11th Army. It's an elite unit known as the Storm Corps. In the Financial Times interview, a senior fellow at South Korea's state-affiliated Institute of National Security Strategy, Go Myung-hyung, said, quote, "These are not ordinary North Korean soldiers, most of whom are never given adequate combat training. These are well-equipped, highly trained mobile light infantry." According to Ukraine's intelligence chief Budanov, he said Russia's agreement with North Korea also includes 500 officers and 3 generals to support the fight, which indicates to me that they're going to fight under their own command structure and their own unit likely instead of mixed into Russian formations. Quick aside, future me here, new information that's come out in early November now indicates that that might not be the case, and that a lot of these North Korean troops might be fighting integrated, kind of split up and put into Russian formations, but we're going to get into that later. They aren't bringing their own armored vehicles or artillery to use. Instead, Russia's sending them to the Higher Artillery Command School in Saratov, where they're learning how to use Russian artillery systems. North Korea has soldiers to spare, right? They got an estimated 1 million forces, but of that, the better equipped Storm Corps, there's like 10 brigades of between 80,000 to 200,000, depending on how you classify their tiers. Historically, this is the unit that has been assigned the most dangerous infiltration missions against South Korea. An article written by Keith Johnson at Foreign Policy assessed that some of it will come down to how well North Korean soldiers are able to perform perform with those Russian weapons, those Russian logistics and tactics. Ukraine in response went ahead and updated their hotline that you can call to defect or surrender to, and it now includes the Korean language. They said, quote, Ukraine will shelter you, feed you, and keep you warm. 3 hot meals a day, medical care, end quote. It appears to have had some early success with some of the less disciplined units. Maybe by early November, we're getting reports now that 18 North Korean soldiers deserted their positions. Now, normally, I'm not one to get too worked up about news of foreign troops. We've already seen foreign fighters in the fight from all over the world. Individuals from America, Britain, Latin America, Chechnya, Chinese, just about every country has individuals that have decided to fight for both sides. Russia in particular has recruited from Cuba, Nepal, Yemen, Sri Lanka, and India, but this is significantly different. It's the first deployment of actual large conventional soldiers. What is concerning to me is seeing firsthand their logistics operation. There's a video from Russia's Sergeyevsky training ground showing North Korean troops being outfitted in Russian gear in preparation for their deployment. And the thing that stuck out to me is we're seeing a scaling operation here. I've been through the logistical machinery of war before, and I know what it looks like when you're preparing to wage war at scale. This kind of assembly line style where you pick up your sleeping bag, then you grab your hat, then your boots, and it's designed potentially, specifically, to scale up to hundreds of thousands if need be. I think the reason the whole world is shocked by this deployment isn't because there are 12,000 North Korean soldiers. It's because they could very easily decide to scale up to 120,000 soldiers over the next year or two. That's why it looks like people are making a mountain out of a molehill here. This resource in the future could be used to avoid the political cost of Putin having to institute a draft in Russia. I'm keeping my eye on the infrastructure developing to see if they try to support scaling up troops. It takes time to do that. You can't just deploy 100,000 soldiers tomorrow. One thing U.S. intelligence will keep an eye on is for construction of additional barracks to support more troops. The Russian military even prepared questionnaires in the Korean language for soldiers to indicate the size of their headgear, uniforms, and shoes. All of this is signs of them attempting to streamline the process and speed it up. The training ground where the DPRK North Korean soldiers are seen receiving gear is in Vladivostok. It's the easternmost station of the Trans-Siberian Railway near the border between Russia and North Korea. This indicates to us that the soldiers are first put on a cargo plane, or what U.S. intelligence suggested it was a cargo ship, that's then sent there. This area is basically the staging area where Russia organizes its forces before sending them west closer to Ukrainian border. It's the loading screen before the level. The train would likely disembark at Nizhny Novgorod right before Moscow. It's about 500 miles from Kursk, and that's where approximately the journey would take place, and it would probably be about a month-long journey door to door from North Korea to the Ukrainian front line at its fastest possible. This logistics line has been well established over the past year when they started shipping the artillery and the weapon systems. According to intelligence reports, these North Korean troops aren't just showing up in their usual uniforms with their standard issue equipment, like that super soaker looking weapon that looks totally normal. No, they're getting the full Russian makeover. Russian uniforms, Russian weapons, Russian ammo, Russian food, even fake Russian identification papers. Why? Possibly to disguise them and make them appear like they're members of the Buryats, which is an ethnic group native to southeastern Siberia. Why them? To put it bluntly, because they look more Asian than most Russians. Russia is calling them the Special Buryat Division. But there is some practical reason for this, and I believe it's so that if they're captured, they're not going to be interrogated as North Koreans potentially, and it's more of a level of plausible deniability for the entire deployment, because I should tell you that currently the Russian and North Korean government continue to deny this is even occurring at all. Believe not what you see with your own eyes. A North Korean representative at the United Nations General Assembly said, quote, "As for the so-called military cooperation with Russia, my delegation does not feel any need for comment on such groundless, stereotype rumors aimed at smearing the image of the DPRK and undermining the legitimate, friendly, and cooperative relations between sovereign states," end quote. Notice how they never outright denied it. He just said that he won't comment on it. But why would pro-Kremlin bloggers leak footage of the North Korean soldiers while at the same time the official government line denies it's even happening? I think there are several reasons for this that might explain it. Pro-Kremlin bloggers might have leaked the footage in an attempt to boost morale for Russian troops, like propaganda to demonstrate their military strength and to show proof that they have external support, even if the government denies it for other diplomatic reasons. Or the less likely scenario, I think that these bloggers might just be more concerned with getting more likes than dealing with the diplomatic fallout. Maybe they care more about the clicks and the subscriptions than their comrades. In current year, likes and follows are more important than integrity. By late October, though, North Korea had entirely shifted their stance. They claimed that any troop deployment to Russia would actually be in accordance with international law, so it wouldn't matter anyway. The diplomatic messaging from Moscow had shifted too. At the BRICS summit, Putin didn't deny North Korea had deployed troops to Russia. Either way, one thing is for sure. If this intelligence is accurate, North Korea would be the first third-party state to deploy a large contingent of conventional forces, and they would be the second nuclear-armed state to enter into this war. When analysts warned about the war in Ukraine spreading to other parts of the world, this is what they were talking about. But one major question pops into my mind that I don't see a lot of people talking about here. Why would Russia risk the chances of escalation and possibly opening the door for justification for Western troops or additional weapons and aid being sent to Ukraine by doing this move? The Baltic countries in Europe, like Lithuania and Poland, are already preparing or at least not ruling out sending troops to Ukraine themselves. When I'm trying to figure out what's coming next, I look less at the articles and publications, and I find it more valuable to look at what the most influential politicians and military leadership are saying in different countries. So in the United States, Representative Mike Turner said on X, quote, "If North Korean troops were to invade Ukraine's sovereign territory, the United States needs to seriously consider taking direct military action against the North Korean troops," end quote. The Overton window has shifted here. We're talking now about potentially sending American troops. To be clear, this isn't about if I agree with this statement or not. What I think doesn't really matter a whole lot compared to what Mike Turner thinks, because he's the House Intelligence Committee head, which oversees legislation when it comes to intelligence activities. He's recommending the United States make a red line here, and he wants to hold a closed backroom door meeting with the president to explain why they should make that policy. Another very influential person in the U.S. government is the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. He said, quote, "What exactly are they doing is left to be seen. If they're co-belligerents, if their intention is to participate in this war on Russia's behalf, it will have impacts not only in Europe, it will also impact things in the Indo-Pacific as well," end quote. So it appears to be up in the air for the moment, but Ukraine's intelligence agency says that they believe the first batch of 2,600 North Korean soldiers will be sent to Kursk by this time that the video publishes in early November. They'll already be fighting. There is an important distinction here that I've noticed relatively few are paying attention to. Intelligence reports indicate these North Koreans will be specifically used to recapture Sudzha inside the Ukrainian-occupied territory in Kursk in Russia. Sudzha is the most important and largest town that Ukraine currently occupies inside Russia. If these North Korean troops are only used for combat purposes inside Russian territory, then it might be considered less of an escalation compared to if they're used inside territory that Russia occupies in Ukraine. Zooming into the more tactical level, if North Korea sends 12,000 troops, is that going to be much of a deciding factor here? U.S. intelligence agencies assess Russia would need around 100,000 soldiers to completely repel Ukraine, and they currently have around 50,000 here. Additional reinforcements could technically be enough to turn the tide, though. A lot is at stake for both sides in Kursk, with the fight being more of a political importance than strategic, which helps to explain why Russia may have calculated the risk of North Korean soldiers here is worth it. If Ukraine is able to hold on to the territory, it would potentially force Putin into making concessions in a potential future peace talk and negotiations. A lot of factors are going to go into deciding whether or not 12,000 North Korean soldiers in this one single focused area is enough to make a difference, and we're going to get into those factors in a second. By late October, we were getting reports that some Russian soldiers were already raising concerns about how some of these North Koreans will be integrating into their unit. For what I'm hearing so far, it's early, but they're saying that it's a complete clusterfuck. One radio transmission intercepted by Ukraine heard them saying, quote, "What the f*** do we do with them?" End quote. And it went on to say that they only have one interpreter for every 3 senior officers. Obviously, this is a developing situation, but early intercepted communications from Signet indicate that 3 Russian soldiers will be assigned as advisors for every platoon of 30 North Korean fighters. According to these intercepts from Ukraine, Russian soldiers were heard talking with frustration about the North Koreans. Their transmissions sounded like they were babysitting them. A Ukrainian spy recorded a Russian soldier in this recording. Translated, you can hear he's saying that he was outraged that his commander ordered him to hand over Russian armored vehicles to the new North Korean soldiers. In another intercept, a Russian soldier is heard derogatorily referring to them as Chinese. I should point out, though, that so far, no agency has been able to independently verify those audio recordings. But if you do take Ukraine at their word, the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, assessed that a number of the North Koreans would very likely desert the front lines, and they believed an advance team had already made it to the front. But the other interesting question here that ties into this is how skilled will the North Korean fighters be? Because that's going to have a huge impact on whether or not they're able to push Ukraine out of Russia. I've got to be honest with you, this is a developing situation, so there's a wide spectrum of different beliefs on this. One of the theories that I've seen is that there's going to be 3 Special Forces highly trained North Korean soldiers for every 100 just regular troops that they send, and that's going to be kind of the ratio here. I asked this question to defense analyst Ju Hong Kim, who's a senior fellow at the Security Management Institute, an expert on the region. And he said,
the 1,500 North Korean special forces sent to Russia's Far East are comparable to Tier 2 units like the Green Beret, focusing on unconventional warfare and infiltration. However, they lack the real-world combat experience of their Western counterparts. As for the remaining 10,500 troops expected to be sent, will likely include not only special forces, but also technicians and logisticians supporting Russia's operations in various non-combat roles.
Kim brings up a great point, and to be fair, people make a lot of jokes about how North Korean soldiers are starving now and that how they'll be able to be fed finally, and they make jokes about how their training looks silly. And while I happen to think that's all true, from Russia's point of view, the benefit here might not entirely be tactical. That's 12,000 less Russian soldiers that have to die. So right there, less of a political hit. And I'm sure whatever they're paying North Korea is less than what they're paying Russian soldiers. The latest information I'm seeing is that enlistment bonuses in Russia are up to $50,000 one-time payment. In that supply and demand economy, it's getting very expensive to find Russians who are willing to fight in Ukraine. How does US intelligence seem to figure out all this stuff before it even happens? Stiff Lips Ups has the perfect short rundown explaining all that.
Thanks for that introduction, Chris. Love the hair, by the way. Now let's talk about the anime-loving intel nerds that are building the intelligence reports you mentioned as we speak. Now, as we all know, military intelligence is a bit of an oxymoron. However, when it comes to gathering intel about our adversaries, this autistic bunch does it better than anyone. These smooth brain operators are all-source analysts, meaning they specialize and aggregate intelligence from all intelligence sources. And for the non-anime watchers in the room, those are HUMINT, or intelligence gathered from human sources. SIGINT, intel gathered from signal or electrical sources. GEOINT, meaning geospatial intelligence. Basically, lots of maps. And the product that they produce for leadership is something called an Army Intelligence Report, or INTREP. Thanks for the task and purpose airtime, Chris. And I really do like your hair. Now, back to you, Chris.
That is ridiculous. Everyone knows I'm Big Spoon. Be sure to check out their Instagram and YouTube channel. They have hilarious rundowns like that. Thank you, stifflipsup.com, for sending that over. You might be wondering how we got to this point where North Korea is basically running a temp agency for Russian military operations. The two go way back. To simplify it, after World War II, the Soviet Union basically played matchmaker between communism and North Korea, setting up Kim Il-sung as the leader of North Korea in 1948. Think of it like being friends with someone because your parents were close roommates. Russia covertly helped North Korea significantly during the Korean War. Over 70 years later now, North Korea is now repaying the favor. The two signed what's called a Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Pact, which is basically a military alliance that makes one party obligated to come to the other's defense. Recent cooperation between Russia and North Korea can be traced back to August of 2023, when intelligence reports revealed that North Koreans had shipped millions of artillery shells, missiles. We reported back in June 2024 when South Korean intelligence claimed that they first heard rumors of this. 6 weeks after the agreement was signed, in June, Ukraine drone footage first spotted North Korean armored vehicles in the form of self-propelled anti-tank missile systems, the Bolsa-4, on the front lines. So we're tracking this slow escalation of aid sent to Russia, which now includes manpower. North Koreans have already worked in Russia in labor camps for decades, but this first initial wave of soldiers started with about 1,500 troops in early October. That's when reports started to leak that North Korean officers were killed on the front lines near Donetsk region inside Ukraine in a missile strike. Some were injured and treated in Moscow, according to a Russian Telegram channel called Kremlin Snuffbox. I don't make up their names. These are just a handful of advisors though, so it might not have crossed the official line of conventional North Korean troops on Ukrainian soil. North Korea has sent troops to a foreign war before, yeah, but it was a very limited number of pilots to help North Vietnam. This is their first wide-scale foreign deployment, and it's largely supported by Russian logistics and power projection abilities. There are theories that this will help North Korea gain combat experience since they haven't fought a war since the 1950s. But I happen to think that that's kind of inconsequential compared to their other goals. North Korea wants missile technology from Russia that Russia has been holding out on for decades. They want to be able to produce more sophisticated, more accurate, and longer-range missiles, including their nuclear weapons. Basically, North Korea wants to be able to prove that they can strike American territory with missiles. They want to be able to prove that they can hit American cities like how we saw Iranian missiles hit an Israeli airfield recently. Russia has some of the know-how to help them do that potentially. We're talking about potentially helping them develop a space-based surveillance system as well. They also will likely use diplomatic leverage because in return they could seek protection from Russia through the UN Security Council, just like how India asked for, use leverage during World War I after they helped out. So North Korea could secure favorable deals for oil, gas, food supplies, or investment into their infrastructure. For Kim Jong-un, this has been his nation's way out of geopolitical jail, so to speak. The New York Times suggested that, quote, for the first time in decades, North Korea has assets that a major power is willing to pay for. So in response to all of this, South Korea's president Yoon Suk-yeol actually had to call an emergency meeting about this. They later put out a statement warning that South Korea could decide to send weapons to Ukraine in response overtly now. South Korean officials agreed to take what's called phased countermeasures, in which they will link the level of their response to how much North Korea and Russia decide to cooperate. That's just a fancy way of saying playground rules. If you kick me, I kick you. If you poke me, I poke you back. I've seen different analysis about China's response. Some experts say China is discouraging this because they don't want to see a strengthened North Korea. Others point to Xi Jinping's call for rapid de-escalation and to avoid third parties joining the war. A New York Times article on October 31st, 2024, said that the US government believes North Korean intervention in Ukraine is something China's not happy about because it draws Europe into the East Asian security and defense issues. According to the New York Times, China doesn't want to threaten their economic trade in that region. Now, the State Department apparently raised the issue directly with Chinese officials. I was just talking the other day with Preston Stewart about how it's interesting how these newspapers put out exactly what the government officials are thinking behind the scenes. It's like a way for them to anonymously test the waters before they do something in policy. U.S. intelligence agencies are trying to figure out what China's views are on the North Korean deployment. The worrying thing that I see on my end is that these nations clearly are ideologically aligned with one another. They all have communist roots, and I think they would all like to see the West weakened. I think looking back at historical precedent helps us understand patterns of behavior in conflicts. It allows us to better anticipate the motivations and outcomes of similar modern actions. I think one of the closest historical parallels is the little-known deployment of 140,000 Indian soldiers to Europe during World War I as part of the British Empire. In 1915, they played a key role in the British-led offensive at Neuve-Chapelle, where they suffered heavy casualties. So it allowed the British to bolster their manpower on the Western Front while they were overstretched in multiple theaters. But get a load of this. After the war, the leaders in India used their contributions during World War I as leverage to demand more political autonomy from the British government. It makes sense. When you sacrifice for a war effort, you expect something in return, right? I'm not going to die for you for nothing. We'll see, this is a key running theme for us to understand what's happening today. The other historical note that I'll make is that history is replete with examples where the direct involvement of foreign country soldiers has led to it sometimes transforming into a regional war, into larger, even global confrontations. The results of these developments are already leading to massive shifts in long-standing policies. Lithuanian Foreign Minister told Politico that it's time for European countries to revisit France's idea of deploying troops to Ukraine. The next few months will reveal just how much this alliance might change the face of modern warfare. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button for more military analysis. We do 2 videos a week. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, signing off this network. Time now.